After finding out the property was transferred, she brought her lover to confront me directly. Anyway, now that the money's in my hands, you can have this crappy house. She told me, I've never loved you all these years. If you know what's good for you, get a divorce quickly. I thought for a moment and decided to give in to her wishes, signing the divorce papers. Fine, the old house is mine, everything else is yours. When I got the divorce certificate, I pulled out some papers about to speak. But she eagerly sped off with her lover. I shrugged and put away the 2 reports I had pulled out of my briefcase. One was a demolition notice for the old house. The other was her late-stage breast cancer diagnosis. 3 days later, at a party hosted by my friend John, he apologized to me. I invited Christina today. I hope you don't mind? I smiled and shook my head. Looking at the friend I've known since childhood, I knew he understood me best, and he invited Christina for my sake. People were already aware of what's between me and Christina. Those who care about me tried to salvage the relationship. But I told John, it won't work. Christina's made up her mind to leave, and nothing I do can change it. Hearing my firm tone, John could only sigh helplessly. John is the CEO of a company, but due to poor management, his company is facing bankruptcy. He had another reason to invite me. He wanted me to help him out. You know my situation better than anyone. You can't just watch me go down. I could see hope in John's eyes. A person like me with a broken family has nothing holding him back anymore. Maybe it's my friends who are worth caring about. So, how can I help you? No matter what, John's been genuinely good to me. Wives may leave, but friends are for life, and I can't ignore them. As long as it's within my power, I'll make sure you're not disappointed. Hearing this, John breathed a sigh of relief. If I didn't step in, his company would surely collapse. When he was about to thank me with tears in his eyes, a voice interrupted. John, we're here. Everyone turned to look at the door. There was my ex-wife Christina, dressed to the nines, walking in with her attractive lover, Calvin. Christina's light radiated across the room. Sorry we're late. I was getting my lover a new hairstyle. Hope you don't mind, John? Calvin approached John, apologizing superficially while actually flaunting. Seeing me there, Christina wrapped her arms around Calvin's neck and gave him a big kiss. She bragged in front of me, my Calvin's the executive director at John's company, a top asset. Not like some people who are losers all their life. All eyes turned to me, because Christina's loser was meant for me. Mike, aren't you ashamed? Is an event like this really one a loser like you should attend? Seeing my lack of reaction, Christina pointed her finger at me, questioning me then and there. Witnessing Christina's accusations, John stepped up, angry and firm. Christina, I invited Mike personally. Don't trouble my friend. Growing up together, whenever I faced trouble, John always stepped in to protect me. But this time, even after John intervened, Christina only became more brazen. She grinned at John. A CEO like you shouldn't lower yourself by defending a loser. With Christina's mocking, John's face grew darker. Calvin, by Christina's side, quickly jumped in to shine. John, don't be upset. I got great news for you. John's face, stern as ever, invited Calvin to speak upon hearing of good news. Calvin raised his eyebrows, glancing at me with pride before saying to John, Company A has agreed to give us the project. If we secure it, our company's financial stream will recover. Hearing this, John's eyes lit up. He grabbed Calvin's hand, looking at him with excitement. This really is great news. If we get this project, you'll be a savior to the company. Clearly, John valued this project immensely. John's company's in dire straits. No company dared give them a break. Securing a project now feels like manna from heaven. If you successfully complete this project, I'll promote you instantly to vice president. Hearing John's promise, Calvin thumped his chest in assurance. He promised John that within a week, he'd nail the project for Company A. With Calvin's promises, Christina grew even prouder. She tightly clung to Calvin and eyed me cynically. She kept mocking, Loser, open your eyes and see what a real man does. Leaving you was the best decision of my life. With a man like Calvin, I wouldn't trade for all the gold in the world. Right in front of everyone, Christina's shamelessness was shocking. Even with the crowd of my friends around, steaming with anger, no one knew how to react. This situation isn't as optimistic as you all think. Who would have known? Right when Calvin and Christina were feeling smug, John suddenly realized what the problem was. Watching Christina publicly humiliate me like that made him feel even worse. The company's finances are a wreck, and we don't have enough money to secure that project. When John laid out the facts, Calvin couldn't help but gasp. He thought he had a chance to impress John, but John's cold reality was a shock. Without financial backing, even if we secure the project, it would ruin the company. There's no way to finalize this right now. The color drained from John's face, and Calvin couldn't sit still any longer. He became more agitated, clutching John's hand and trying to persuade him desperately. Think it over, don't give up so easily. This is an opportunity one worked hard to get. Everyone knew to partner with Cydia Group, you need solid resources. Cydia Group, as the client, won't provide any financial support until project completion. If they're not funding, then our company has to front all costs. John's company is already broke and can't support such a big expense. It's like chasing a pipe dream. This project could save us. If John doesn't take a risk, we're done for. Observing Calvin's agitation, it was clear to the perceptive that Calvin was probably taking a cut from the project. If John rejects this deal, Calvin loses his kickback opportunity. So he's pushing John for his own benefit. This discussion ends here. Deciding on this project is up to the company. You can't sway me, John said firmly after his realization. He decisively rejected Calvin's suggestion. Just as John was ready to walk away from the project, I stepped up with a smile, giving John's shoulder a reassuring pat. If this project can save your company, go for it. The funding isn't an issue. Before I could finish, Christina interrupted harshly. Who are you to open your mouth here? A nobody with no cash. Christina stood in front of me, eyes full of disdain, seeing me as nothing more than a loser. Her contempt for me was why she left me. Hearing me speak up infuriated her, as if each word from my mouth was an embarrassment to her. Best keep your mouth shut. Stop making a fool of yourself. Everyone knows you're broke. In front of all my friends, Christina didn't hold back, humiliating me thoroughly. Looking down on the poor, Christina saw no future with me, which is why she left without looking back. She chose Calvin because he is an executive, believing marriage to him would make her a wealthy wife. Compared to Calvin, I'm just a joke in her eyes. As she threatened further, her excitement grew. Faced with her reaction, I calmly responded to John with sincerity. If this project can help you, I'm willing to assist. Hearing my offer, John's dimmed eyes lit up again, as if energized, gripping my hand like a lifeline. He was so worked up he could barely speak. Are you serious? Will you really help me? I nodded with a smile. But just as I was about to answer, Calvin frantically cut me off. John, do you really believe this loser? He's lying. Before Calvin finished, John, unexpectedly, slapped him across the face. Calvin stood there, a red mark visible on his cheek, still processing what just happened. Who told you you could interrupt my conversation with my friend? John said coldly. Calvin stood in shock, not expecting John to slap him in front of everyone. His eyes, filled with disbelief, landed on me, utterly confused about why this was happening. Seeing Calvin slapped, Christina was furious. She immediately lunged to attack John. Are you nuts? Calvin's helping you, why hit him? Did Mike put you up to this? Mike is my best friend and I won't stand for anyone slandering him. John gave no ground, shoving Christina away, and faced them both with an expressionless face, declaring his stance. When Christina felt disgraced after being pushed back, she attempted to confront John again, but Calvin pulled her into a tight embrace from behind. Please, enough. Don't make things worse, he pleaded, afraid that Christina's actions might cost him his position, resulting in a loss he couldn't afford. John has his own decisions and we're following his plan. If you keep causing trouble, don't blame me for flipping out. After hearing Calvin say this, Christina was at a loss for what to do. After all, she had put in a lot of effort to stand up for Calvin. She didn't expect Calvin to not only not thank her but also call her unreasonable. But Calvin was her love, and if things went sour, Calvin might leave. That would be a huge loss for Christina. Baby, don't worry. I'll do whatever you say and I won't embarrass you. Hearing Calvin's scolding, Christina wasn't angry. Instead, she acted like she was calming down a child, agreeing with Calvin in front of everyone. Seeing how Calvin and Christina behaved, John snorted and exchanged a look with me. Our eyes met, and a few seconds later, it seemed he understood something. He calmed down and said, "Let's go with your plan and get the project in City A. No matter how tough it is, our company will take it on." That look from me reassured John. After hearing John agree to take on the project, Calvin suddenly got interested. He quickly nodded and bowed, approaching John. "John, since you've changed your mind and want to take the project, can I be in charge of it entirely?" John's face was expressionless. He only agreed because I was backing him. Now my rival wanted to take charge of the project, which felt like a challenge to me in front of everyone. John didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at me for my opinion. Just as he was about to speak, I calmly said, "If he wants to handle the project, let him. But there's one condition. He has to figure out the funding himself." The room went silent in shock. Christina couldn't sit still. Like a tigress, she rushed over, pulling at my clothes and yelling, "You small-minded guy. You're just jealous to see me with Calvin, trying every way to cause him trouble. Huh?" To defend Calvin, Christina accused me of various things while pulling at me. She made me out to be a petty man. Seeing the persistent Christina, my expression grew calmer. To me, all of this was entirely expected. Christina idolized Calvin and wouldn't let anyone target him, especially me. "I'm warning you, mess with Calvin again and I'll sue you, believe it or not." Just as Christina was issuing her warning, she suddenly swayed and fell to the ground. When people around helped her up, they noticed she was bleeding from the corner of her mouth. Everyone was taken aback, thinking I had infuriated Christina to the point of causing this. But I looked at Christina without any sympathy. Expressionless, I said to Calvin, "Get Christina to a hospital. There isn't much time left after all. Christina has cancer." After she left me, I received Christina's medical report. It said she didn't have much time left, but Christina didn't know this. It was clear Christina was too wrapped up in enjoying herself with Calvin to care about her health. She hadn't even gone for a checkup. Calvin didn't delay, rushing Christina to the hospital while calling John, insisting on taking on the company project. After the event, John drove me home himself. In the car, he asked, "You agreed to help me, so why let Calvin handle the project?" I smirked. I agreed to help John because I didn't want to see his company collapse. I received a nice payout from a house demolition and was planning to invest some in John's company, making it easy for him to rebound. But seeing how Calvin was so eager, I had another thought. If he wants to put on a show, let's give him the chance. Hearing this, John slammed on the brakes, parking the car on the roadside and looking at me in disbelief. "He took your wife away, and you're still helping him?" When he said this, I could see John's anger. Friends around me were furious about Christina leaving with Calvin. Some even offered to handle the situation for me. But I didn't agree. I'm not weak. I wasn't just going to let it slide. I had my ways. I wanted to make those two pay. So, unlike my friends, I wasn't going to get all impulsive. Calvin wanted this project badly, and there must be some benefit. Now, we just need to play the long game. After a puff of smoke, under the streetlight, I shared my plan. I was ready to invest in John's company, but seeing Calvin jump at the chance changed things. This is such a fantastic opportunity. Doesn't he want to lead the project? Let him go raise the funds. If he can gather the money, then he can run the project. John doesn't quite get my idea yet, but seeing how calm I am, he doesn't really object. Instead, he awkwardly tells me, "That guy can't raise funds at all. If he can't, won't the project be doomed in his hands?" I give a mysterious smile. Leaning in close to John's ear, I spell out my plan. After hearing it, John slaps his leg and, admiringly, gives me a thumbs up. You've really got it. This move is brilliant. Let's do it your way. The next day, Calvin walks into John's office. When he shows up all worried, John has pretty much figured it out. Calvin's here to tell John he doesn't have a way to gather the funds. John looks like the project is done for. Without the funds, nothing can move forward. While Calvin is still complaining, John closes the file and, with a thoughtful look, says to Calvin, I have a friend who could lend some funds through a guarantee, but it can't go through our company's account. Hearing about this possibility, Calvin suddenly perks up. He quickly tells John if it can't go through the company account, let it go through mine. As long as the funds are here, the project can go ahead smoothly. The friend John's talking about is actually a loan company. It's a private one with super high interest rates. What John's really doing here is trying to trap Calvin in a different way. If you step up, I see big risks. You don't have a strong backing, and they won't release the money quickly either. Seeing John about to reject Calvin's suggestion, Calvin rushes to pull out some property deeds from his bag. He lays them out in front of John. If I can get the funds, I'm willing to use these houses as collateral. Once the money's in and the project's smooth, we'll make a huge profit. John glances over, noting that the deeds are all in Christina's name. After Christina and I divorced, she took several properties, putting them in her name. Now that she's with Calvin, she's handed over these houses to him completely. Calvin's using them as collateral without hesitation, seemingly without even consulting Christina. John tests the waters. If the project fails and the funds can't be recouped, those houses will be gone. Aren't you worried at all about the risk? Calvin casually shakes his head. He nonchalantly says to John, Christina gave me these houses. She's signed off on them. I have full control. Seeing Calvin's confident response, John doesn't hesitate. He makes a call, and the loan company's representatives show up. With those houses as collateral, the loan company wastes no time, releasing $10 million. Once the funds come through, John hands them over to Calvin, letting him handle the project completely. The real action is just starting. In the hospital room, I put down the fruit basket and flowers. When Christina wakes up and sees me, she's surprised, but quickly turns cold. Who let you in? We're divorced. I don't want anything to do with you. She made it clear enough, implying she wants nothing to do with me anymore. I'm not here to bother you, just to warn you. Those houses in your name might all be lost soon. Shut up. Just as I open my mouth, an angry voice shouts from the doorway. Calvin rushes in, raising his voice, trying to stop me from continuing. You're trying to ruin what Christina and I have. I won't let you succeed. He sets down his lunchbox and gently helps Christina sit up, feeding her soup. Christina looks happy as Calvin feeds her. Even though she's pale, with lots of hair falling out, her face shows no sign of panic. If I had to guess, I'd say Calvin hasn't told her the real test results. There's some covering up going on. Christina and I are in love. Don't try to come between us. I'll never believe anything you say. Finishing the soup, Christina glares at me coldly, knocking over the fruit and flowers I brought. Pointing at me, she says, You useless piece of crap. Get as far away from me as possible. I'm beyond disgusted with you. Don't show your face here again. Calvin steps forward, grabs my shirt, and pushes me towards the door. He angrily threatens, Listen up. I'm running this project. Once it's done, I'm the company's CEO. So don't pull any stunts. I could see another layer of meaning in his eyes. He was scared I'd spill the beans at that moment. So he was trying to threaten me in his own way. But facing Calvin's threat, I calmly took out a medical report. I asked chillly, Christina's got cancer and it's late stage. Why haven't you guys started any systematic treatment yet? Just one sentence. The cup in Christina's hand shattered on the ground. And Calvin was caught off guard, clearly not expecting me to expose him. By the time he snapped back, Christina had already jumped off the bed. She snatched the medical report. After seeing what was on it, Christina was utterly devastated. She collapsed to the floor. Why did you lie to me? You said I was fine. Just a few days in the hospital, and I'd be good to go home. Facing the reality of having a terminal illness, Christina couldn't accept it. She wailed in agony, questioning through tears. Seeing Christina's reaction, Calvin, who'd finally gathered himself, threw all the blame on me. This is all Mike's doing. He wants to scare you. Don't believe him. Damn, Mike. Are you jealous of how happy Calvin and I are? So you did all this? After hearing Calvin's lies, Christina actually believed it. She tore the medical report to shreds, picked up the flower basket and fruit, and hurled them at me, cursing as she did. You're a narrow-minded man. No woman will ever love you. May you die lonely and single. Seeing Christina act like she'd been brainwashed, the last shred of hope I had smashed to pieces. I had wanted to save Christina, but now clearly there's no point. When a woman is willing to crash and burn, even a miracle couldn't pull her back. I picked up a bruised apple, took a bite, and watched Christina. I left her with one final line. Since you trust him so much, I wish you all the happiness. Remember your words today, and don't come to me, ever. I turned and walked out of the hospital. My driver respectfully opened the car door for me. I got into my new luxury car, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number. It was the CEO's number from the company in City A. When I called, he sounded surprised. Mike, how come you've got time to call me? The CEO was an old schoolmate of mine. I'd invested in the company ages ago. I was one of their shareholders. When the major shareholder calls, the CEO listens, no questions asked. I told him, shut down the project you've got. Walk away even if it means breaching contract and facing penalties. No more deals with Calvin. No hesitation. Under my orders, City A's company stopped working with Calvin. When Calvin heard the news, it was a huge blow. He rushed out of the hospital, needing a fix, and headed straight to John. But I was with John having hot pot. The good vibe got trashed when Calvin barged in. John grabbed his drink, splashed it right in Calvin's face, pointed at him and said, "What the hell were you doing? We gave you a major project and you screwed it. Now it's on you." As if on cue, a loan company called, demanding their money back or they'd take Calvin's house. As the courthouse called about this, Christina was about to check out of the hospital. Thanks to Calvin's sweet talk, Christina hadn't actually got a thorough checkup for herself. She thought she only had a tummy issue and would be fine with some rest at home. Christina was packing happily, waiting for Calvin to pick her up. But when she heard from the court that Calvin mortgaged their house for a $10 million loan, Christina snapped. She argued fiercely with the court. Are you insane? My husband is an executive. Why would he privately mortgage our home for a loan? Faced with her questioning, the court quickly presented evidence. Calvin's contract with the loan company, his signature and stamp. Christina's property certificate. Seeing all the evidence, Christina panicked. The court told Christina, Calvin's gone AWOL. If we can't find him today, we'll seize your property. She tried calling Calvin, but his line was dead. Hastily leaving the hospital, she returned home to find everything gone. All her properties sealed by the court. Christina felt her world crashing down. With every attempt to contact Calvin failed, she called me in desperation. As soon as the line connected, please help me. Calvin scammed me out of my property. If he doesn't show up, I'll lose everything. I sighed, hearing the despair in Christina's voice. I went to the hospital to warn her about this, but Christina had showed off her love, treating my warning like a joke. Karma's coming on fast now. I wasn't in the mood to rub salt in Christina's wound, so I just said, money's just stuff, comes and goes. You should cherish the time you have left. Then I heard a clatter. Christina's phone hit the floor. I'd laid it out clear enough. Christina didn't have much time left. Messing around was just wasting her life. At the entrance of my new villa, a woman with wild hair showed up, pounding on my iron gate like a madwoman. My dog barked like crazy, and the housekeeper, startled, called me to come home. When I pulled up in my Maybach, this crazed woman was wide-eyed seeing me step out. Mike, how'd you get so rich out of nowhere? Where'd you get that car and house? This mad woman was Christina. She hadn't found Calvin, and all those court demands were catching up to her. Her nerves were shot. Christina called me, but I wasn't about to help her. After poking around, she found out where I live. That's why she ended up at my doorstep. You left me a broke as a joke, just taking the old family house. How did you suddenly turn filthy rich? Are you hiding something from me? Got a vault somewhere? If you're keeping secrets, cut me in, man. Christina was lost it, shaking me to make it all true. But I peeled her hands off, dusted myself off, and seriously said, yeah, I was broke after the divorce. But that didn't mean I was a deadbeat. I'm not hiding anything. Want to know why I'm rich? The family house got demolished and I got paid. Everyone thought that old house wasn't worth squat. Even Christina did and let me have it. Hey, thanks to you, I scored millions in comp. That almost sent Christina into a dizzy rage. As her knees buckled, she stubbornly shook her head. You're faking it, trying to mess with me. You didn't get any money. This is all to make me mad, right? I pulled out the compensation document, showed her the official seal and amount. Her eyes nearly popped. All that cold, hard cash. Compared to this, Christina's houses were small potatoes. In seconds, Christina flipped, dropping to her knees, clutching my legs, pleading, honey, you're loaded now. For old time's sake, help me out, won't you? And then I guessed you're begging for my buddy's money, right? Just then, John walked out from the villa. All those times before, no matter the blowouts between me and Christina, John, as a mutual friend, never got involved. But this time, he stepped in and said, a money-grubbing woman like you doesn't deserve sympathy. My buddy Mike isn't blind, he won't fall for your lies again. John nailed it. Christina looked at me with hopeful eyes. But I was ice cold. Pulled out a check. Didn't even glance at her. Here's 100 grand. You'll need it soon. Hearing about the money felt like a slap in the face for Christina. She jumped up trying to hit me. But I caught her hand. What's the point of humiliating someone who's knocking on death's door? Christina went pale, eyes filled with despair. You really want me to die? Looking at her, I'd run out of patience. When she betrayed me, she died in my heart already. No sympathy left. I'm giving you this 100 grand to set your affairs in order. You won't get your properties back. Your beloved man won't pay back that money ever. That punched through Christina's heart like a knife. She shook and spat out blood. I sidestepped real smooth. She crumbled to the ground like a leaf, glaring at me with murderous intent, cursing, you heartless bastard. Even if I die, I won't let you live in peace. Christina finally collapsed. She went down right in front of us. When the ambulance arrived, they took her straight to the ICU. After some tests, the doctor issued a critical condition notice. He said Christina only had a few days left. During that time, we needed to keep an eye on her and make sure nothing upset her. Because if something happened again, not even a miracle could save Christina. But while Christina's family arrived one by one and waited outside her room, Christina mysteriously disappeared right in front of everyone. When we found her, it was at a car accident scene. Christina knew her condition was beyond hope. And the truth was finally clear to her. Calvin had kept Christina's illness hidden. He'd done it to get his hands on Christina's property. After getting with Christina, Calvin never told her what was really going on. Even when Christina felt unwell and wanted to go to the hospital, Calvin always found excuses to stop her. He figured if Christina knew she had a major illness, she'd do whatever it took to get better. And if she sold all her properties to pay for treatment, Calvin would end up with nothing. So Calvin covered up Christina's condition through various means to get her property. He thought that when Christina eventually died, he'd be her last companion, and her assets would naturally go to him. Calvin's plan was going along as intended, but then a project at work caught his eye due to the promise of huge profits. Calvin decided to go after it. He mortgaged Christina's property and grabbed the project through private channels. But when the client pulled out, Calvin realized his scheme had failed. To make up for his losses, he sold everything, took Christina's stuff, and disappeared. By the time Christina figured it all out, it was too late. She was ashamed to face me and her family. She managed to track down Calvin, and without hesitation, she sneaked out of the hospital. With nothing left to lose, Christina drove a car and, when she saw Calvin walking, she sped straight towards him. The accident killed 2 people, and in the wreckage, their charred bodies were oddly tangled together. It looked both laughable and sad.